Good evening, everyone. Happy to be here today and discuss with you about some lessons that I've learned about how to leverage user research for more effective collaboration within organizations. Thank you, Mayor, for the introduction. I'll tell you a little bit about UX at ADP, and then we'll kind of step into my presentation. So ADP has over 200 UXers across the world. They've made a significant commitment to UX, so it's an exciting place to be right now. There's also a very large UX research presence at ADP. We have over 50 researchers also spread across the world. I have a couple on my team that are also there in Hyderabad, and we have folks in New Zealand and Brazil, Canada, and US. There's also another UX team in the UK, and then the remainder of the teams are in the US and clustered around Atlanta, Georgia, and New York, New Jersey. Okay, so I'll get into my presentation now. See if I can figure this out. All right. So how many of you, maybe as a child, remember one of your parents, scolding you not to eat a treat or a dessert because it was going to spoil your dinner, and then you said, okay, fine, and you turn around and a couple minutes later you see your mom or your dad sneaking one of those cookies or treats after they just told you not to do it. It's that whole saying, do as I say, not as I do. So how does this relate to user research? Well, it's basic human nature that people often say one thing and do another. And we have to be careful not to design just to user claims or user attitudes. We have to actually observe and measure the user's behavior, and then take that into account in terms of how to either improve a design or create a design that will accommodate those behaviors. So in user research, we have kind of two areas, attitudinal, which is usually to understand users' beliefs. And this is more heavily used in market research and marketing departments. And then there's behavioral research, which is focused on seeking to understand what people do within the product or service in question. So there's actually a place for both in product and user research, but I'm going to focus a bit more today on the behavioral side. So how might we leverage user research to effectively collaborate across our organizations so that we ensure we're building the right thing and we're building the thing right? The methods that we use in UX research will help us to focus on those two areas. Is it the right thing? Is it meeting their needs? And did we do it right? So let's talk a little bit about the research process and how it will kind of answer that prior question. So first, are we solving the right problems? Well, we have to identify and quantify users' experiences and unmet needs first to understand, what are their problems? oftentimes, product owners or dev teams, they think that they know what the problem is, but sometimes it takes UX to get in there and dig and understand and really communicate with our users to understand how the product may or may not be solving their problems. And then next, are we building the right solutions? So as we create prototypes, how do we evaluate the usefulness and whether that solution is actually solving the problem? Does it fit? Is it just, is the feature or the new product really going to add value to the users and make their lives easier, make their jobs easier? And then finally, have we done it right? This is where UX research measures and improves the usability of our design solutions. So we can't manage what we can't measure. So it's really important here that we focus on our behavioral metrics around user experience, and ultimately combine both approaches of attitudinal data and behavioral data to understand if we've done it right. So I'm going to step through an example of how we could apply this process to this particular problem. So imagine that you're a UX consultant and you've been hired by the local parks and recreation to help them solve a problem. But they had lots of complaints from their patrons or the people that come to the park and utilize the facilities, that they're complaining about needing a streamlined way to get from a parking lot to a ball field. So how would we go about defining that problem, understanding the problem? Is it even a problem for the users? And then, solutioning and measuring, did we do it right? So let's apply that process. So first, are we solving the right problem? This would be the discovery phase of the research. And typically, one of the first things that I do and I challenge my team to do is you have to understand where the user is today. We have to baseline the current experience, understand their journey, because that will help us discover not only their behaviors, but any obstacles or pain points along the way as well. So again, identifying pain points is understanding what was challenging for their journey. And in this case, understanding the problem within the scope of the actual environment. So this is where it's important to measure and talk to our users while they're actually using our products, right? Because we need that context of, being in the environment. So in terms of the journey, here's an example for one of the patrons of the park, right? And maybe based on going to the park and observing users, you come up with a few personas. And this persona is perhaps the parent with the young child. So in this example, parent parks the car, has to get a bunch of stuff out of the car, right? The cooler, the chairs, and the extra kid. And then getting all that stuff out of the car and then making the journey towards the ballpark. Along the way, what's happening? Well, the cooler keeps getting stuck on uneven grass or rocks. So it's an obstacle for this parent. Then to top it off, in addition to the environmental issues, this patron is wearing flip-flops. So what is it about, maybe her personal style or, interaction in the environment is affecting her problem space, right? So she's wearing flip-flops, and it's difficult for her to manage the terrain and handle all the gear and hold hands with her child. Then, maybe she's complaining, oh, she's getting bitten by bugs while she's walking towards the field. So that's just another annoying thing because she's walking through the grass and the rocks. Finally, she arrives at the ballpark after maybe 5-minute journey. Seems like an hour, even though it was only 5 minutes. And then, shoot, it's really busy and there's a lot of people there and she can't find a spot to set up all of her stuff. So now she's feeling frustrated. So let's say we take that approach, watch several folks one afternoon, and we feel like we get a pretty good idea of some of the personas. But at the same time, we don't want to base an entire not necessarily solution, but problem space identification on just one small amount of data. So how do we scale that data and get more information, from a broader group of users? So in this case, maybe we decide, okay, let's survey the park patrons and, work with the facility to determine either how to access the users, maybe arrive on a busy weekend with an iPad and a brief survey to try to get more data, or email blast a survey. But again, getting users at scale is always one of the biggest challenges. So you have to work within the environment and the scope to figure out what would be best. So in this case, as a consultant, we decide that we're going to, send an email blast to all of the patrons that were signed up. And from that, we get even more data that's going to help us define our problem space. So we learned that 60% of the patrons come to the park every Saturday in the fall and the spring. And 70% of those users have kids that are less than 8 years old. So safety is going to be an important aspect in any solution that we provide. And in addition, we learned that 80% are carrying excess gear, chairs, coolers, water bottles, etc. So we need to make sure that we're going to accommodate those extra things that the users are bringing with them, their personal belongings. So the next step would be to ideate. And I'm sure this will be very familiar to all of you. And this is where, some of the design thinking methods come in. How can we brainstorm and make a better experience? Instead of just immediately thinking, oh, we're going to, go straight to one solution, let's be creative. Let's get the project team together. And if there were no constraints, no cost, no boundaries, let's diverge and come up with as many ideas as we can. So for example, Maybe we could provide ground transportation, like a little tram or little golf carts that will take the people, give them a ride with their gear and their kids to the park. Maybe we could pave a path. What if we could offer a drone to carry their gear, right? So maybe then they don't have to, it's kind of like a valet service. So they don't have to worry about all their stuff. They can just take their child and walk to the park. That might be kind of cool. What if we made it really fun experience, like a really cool experience for the whole family, and we give them hot air balloon rides from the parking lot to the field? What if there's just something simple and low tech, like having park staff that's available to help patrons, right? So maybe there's just another person that's there to help carry the stuff or, watch the child or whatever. What if we had like horses or mules available to carry the gear and the kids could ride on them? So again, I think you get the idea. Like at this point, we just want to think of everything and not converge on a solution too quickly, because this is where we can come up with some really innovative, potentially and fun things. Well, let's say based on reality, when it comes to time and budget and feasibility of, what can actually be done within a given time period, and the team decides to focus in on the solution of creating a paved path from the parking lot to the ball field. So they felt that this would solve a lot of the users' problems, would solve the problem of the uneven terrain, of the bug issue of walking through the grass. It will make it easier to pull a rolly cart or push a stroller. So this was the solution that the team decides to start building. So user research still has a role in all of these phases of the solution development. So next, as we go to, are we building the right solution? As we're in the concept or the prototype stage, we also need to be gathering data from our users to answer these questions. So, first we want to know, how did they get from, let's say, once they have a concept, how did they travel from parking lot A to B? And maybe we do another survey and we find out that, 100% of people said that they took the path. So then we're thinking, great, our solution worked, right? We send a survey, we're good. We don't have to worry about it. Problem solved. Project is over. Well, if we don't actually observe what the users are doing once we have that solution, then we may never discover that we might not have really solved the problem correctly. So you can see here that the design and the intent was to build a path. But maybe we slightly missed the mark in that, really users wanted the absolute shortest path. They didn't want the path that went maybe by the concessions or by the restrooms. They just wanted the shortest path to get to the field. So this is where we have, design intent or solution intent kind of in conflict with the actual reality. And this is where also, you can see the difference between here's our design, but the UX part of it is the reality. And this is why it's so important that we are evaluating our solutions within the context of their use. So then we have to try to understand what, why users made those choices, right? Why did they take either the paved path or the cut-through path, the dirt path? And what happened along the way? And what can we do to make it better? So did we build it right? Well, we're kind of guessing based on that initial feedback and observations within the context that we probably missed the mark a little bit. So let's measure. If we measure success and performance, then that will give us a deeper insight into, did we build it right? So taking the same example, if we look at how many users took each path and what was that performance, what was the speed, what was their efficiency, and then it becomes pretty clear that the 70% took the dirt path because it only took half the time of the paved path, which was the solution that we brought to the users. And if we didn't do this measurement, we may not get to this level of insight. It's one thing to know that 70% of the users took the path, but understanding and measuring that performance gives us that deeper insight into, oh, well, they did this because it was more efficient. And if you think about the products that we're building in technology, it's mainly because a user has a job to be done, right? And not only do they want a great experience, they want to get it done quickly and efficiently and correctly, actually. So that's where accuracy comes into this as well. Have we designed a product that is going to reduce the amount of errors, and when errors do occur, allow for users to easily self-correct? In addition, then finally there's preference. So what do users prefer? What was their perception of the overall experience? How would they rate the ease of use? So here, if we look at preference, we might see that we still had almost 40% of users that would take the paved path, even though 60% of users maybe preferred the dirt path. And then we kind of have to go back and dig a little deeper and look at, the why, and why are users picking the paved path if they prefer that one. Maybe they have rolly carts, wheeled wagons, etc. And then if they take the dirt path, perhaps it's because they're hand carrying items and kids or etc. Let me go back one slide just a second. So I just want to emphasize that in this stage, when we're measuring, it's really important that we look at all of these types of metrics. We can't make product decisions just based on user preference. At the same time, we can't make product decisions just based on user performance, right? We have to look at all of these and, success, obviously, are they able to successfully complete it? The accuracy, the error piece, the performance or the speed, and the preference. And then that gives us like a complete picture of the experience and helps us understand if we actually built the product right. So as I mentioned earlier, user research has a role throughout the entire product development cycle. And if we utilize best practices with these types of repeatable UX research methods, we can support product development process in a more effective way, whether it's discovery early on in the phase, with understanding our users, gathering requirements, and then transitioning into design exploration with personas, developing personas, defining our journey maps, understanding the user's tasks and the environment of use, which plays into service design. And then how do we test or measure our solutions with usability testing, benchmarking, A/B testing, and also accessibility. If you think back to our example of the paved path, that solution would help users that maybe were in a wheelchair, and those folks might not be able to use the dirt path. So there are benefits to the various solutions that we need to make sure we measure and capture along the way and within the process. And then finally, we need to listen to our users. And we do this through a lot of different methodologies. User behavior analytics, Google Analytics, Pendo, ways to really measure when users are in our products, what paths are they taking, how long does it take to, complete a task? How can we do more surveys and get feedback from our users within product and outside of product? But essentially, user research has to be, it has to provide value to our stakeholders within the product development process. And we need to make sure that our insights are intuitive, compelling, and consumable. So UX research helps the product development process to make decisions based on data and a deep understanding of the root cause of users' problems. Thank you.